In 24 years of judging talent competitions, Simon Cowell had developed an almost supernatural ability to read people within seconds. He could spot manufactured sob stories, detect fake confidence, and sense genuine talent before a contestant even opened their mouth. But when 64-year-old Samuel Cole stepped onto the Britain's Got Talent stage, carrying himself with an oddly familiar confidence, Simon felt something he'd never experienced before, a recognition so deep it made his hands tremble against the judge's table. The London Palladium hummed with Saturday evening energy, but Simon couldn't shake an inexplicable sense of unease that had been building all day. He'd woken from the same recurring dream he'd been having for weeks, fragments of childhood memories that felt both real and impossible. Images of playing with another boy who looked exactly like him, sharing secrets and laughter with someone who vanished whenever Simon tried to focus on his face. The dreams felt like memories, but they made no sense. Simon knew his own history. He was an only child until his younger brother Nicholas was born. Samuel Cole walked into the spotlight with measured steps, and immediately the venue felt different. At 64, he was exactly Simon's age, but more than that, his salt and pepper hair caught the lights in the same way. His intelligent dark eyes held the same intensity, and his jawline was unmistakably, impossibly familiar. He wore a navy blazer that somehow made him look distinguished without trying, and he carried himself with quiet authority that didn't demand attention, but commanded respect. "Good evening," Amanda Holden called out with her usual warmth. "What's your name, love?" "Samuel Cole," he replied, and his voice sent a chill down Simon's spine. Not just the slight Australian accent that suggested years away from England, but something deeper, a cadence, a rhythm that felt like hearing an echo of his own voice played back to him. "How old are you, Samuel?" David Walliams asked, though something about the man suggested he carried more years and experience than his appearance revealed. "I'm 64, Samuel said, his eyes scanning the judge's table before settling on Simon with an intensity that was both familiar and unsettling. Born on October 7th, 1959. His birthday, the exact same day, down to the year. The odds of that coincidence made his head spin, but what made it worse was the way Samuel was looking at him, not with the starstruck expression of a contestant meeting a famous judge, but with the searching gaze of someone looking for answers. "And where are you from originally?" Alacia Dixon asked, clearly charmed by Samuel's presence. "London, originally," Samuel said, never taking his eyes off Simon. "Born at London Bridge Hospital, but I was adopted as a baby and raised in Australia. I've spent the last 40 years building a music school in Sydney for children who can't afford traditional music education." Simon felt the world tilt slightly. London Bridge Hospital, that was where he'd been born, on October 7th, 1959. The same day, the same hospital, the same everything. "That's wonderful work," Amanda said genuinely. "What brings you back to England for BGT?" Samuel paused, and in that pause something shifted in his expression. The polite contestant mask slipped away, revealing something much more vulnerable underneath. "I'm here because 3 months ago, my adoptive mother passed away," Samuel said, his voice steady despite the emotion underneath. "While clearing out her belongings, I found some documents and photographs that changed everything I thought I knew about my life." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, yellowed with age. "I learned that I wasn't given up for adoption because my birth mother couldn't care for me. I was given up because there were 2 of us, and she could only afford to keep one." The atmosphere in the venue shifted dramatically. The audience sensed they were witnessing something beyond entertainment, something raw and real and unprecedented. Simon's hands were shaking now, gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles had gone white. "2 of you?" Simon asked, his voice barely audible through his wireless microphone. Samuel opened the envelope and pulled out a black and white photograph. Even from the judge's table, they could see it showed 2 identical newborn babies lying side by side in a hospital crib. "According to the documents I found," Samuel said, holding up the photograph so the cameras could capture it, "I have an identical twin brother, born at the same hospital, on the same day. We were separated when we were just days old." The Palladium erupted in gasps and murmurs. The other judges were looking back and forth between Samuel and Simon, and for the first time, seeing what should have been obvious from the moment Samuel walked onto the stage, the unmistakable physical similarities, the same bone structure, the same features that had become famous around the world. Simon stood up so abruptly that his chair nearly toppled backward. His face had gone completely pale, and he was staring at Samuel like he was seeing a ghost. "What's your brother's name?" Simon asked, his voice cracking. Samuel's eyes filled with tears. According to the birth certificate I found, his name is Simon Eric Cowell, born the same day I was, at London Bridge Hospital, adopted by Eric and Julie Cowell, who apparently believed they were taking in an only child. The venue fell into complete silence, not the anticipatory quiet before a performance, but the stunned silence that follows a revelation so shocking it takes time for minds to process what they've just heard. Simon walked around the judge's table like a man in a trance. Each step felt surreal, like walking through one of those impossible dreams he'd been having. But this was real. This was happening on live television in front of 3,000 people. "Show me," Simon said when he reached the front of the stage. "Show me everything." Samuel knelt down and handed Simon the manila envelope. With trembling hands, Simon pulled out birth certificates, adoption papers, and a handwritten letter in faded ink. "This letter is from our birth mother, Julie Brett," Samuel said quietly. "She was 17 when we were born. Unmarried, scared, with no family support. She couldn't afford to raise twins." Simon read the letter, his lips moving silently as he processed words that rewrote his entire understanding of his life. "I can only keep one baby," he read aloud. "I chose the one who seemed calmer, who cried less. I named him Simon, and arranged for Eric and Julie Cowell to adopt him as their own. The other baby I gave to a family in Australia, who promised to love him as much as I love them both." Simon looked up at Samuel, and for the first time everyone in the venue could see the impossible truth written across their faces. They weren't just similar, they were identical, not just in features, but in expressions, in the way they carried themselves, in mannerisms that genetics had hardwired into both of them. "This is impossible," Simon whispered, but even as he said it, he knew it wasn't. The dreams, the sense of something missing, the inexplicable feeling that there was a part of him somewhere else in the world, it all made sense now. "I've been having dreams," Samuel said, as if reading Simon's mind. "My whole life, dreams of playing with another boy who looked exactly like me. I thought they were just fantasies until I found these papers. I've had the same dreams," Simon said, his voice thick with emotion. "The same exact dreams." That's when Simon did something that broke every protocol in his 24 years of judging. He climbed onto the stage. The production team was frantically gesturing from the control room, but Simon wasn't thinking about television anymore. He was looking at his brother, his identical twin brother. For the first time in 64 years, standing face to face, the resemblance was undeniable. They were the same height, with the same build, the same way of standing with one shoulder slightly higher than the other. But more than physical similarities, there was an instant connection that went beyond explanation. "What's your middle name?" Simon asked suddenly. "Eric," Samuel replied. "Samuel Eric Cole, after my adoptive father, but apparently after our birth father too." Simon's eyes filled with tears. "Simon Eric Cowell. They gave us both the same middle name. Even when they separated us, she kept that connection." The brothers stood staring at each other. 64 years of separation, of questions without answers, of a bond that had somehow survived despite distance and deception. The audience was openly weeping. Amanda, David and Alessia were holding each other, watching something that transcended entertainment and became purely human. "Were you planning to perform tonight?" Simon asked. Samuel laughed through his tears. "I was going to sing a song I wrote called The Missing Piece, about feeling incomplete your whole life and not understanding why." "Don't sing it," Simon said, stepping forward and pulling his brother into an embrace that was 64 years in the making. "Live it. We've both been missing pieces our entire lives, and we just found each other." The Palladium exploded in applause, not the polite, programmed applause of a television audience, but the spontaneous, emotional response of 3,000 people witnessing something miraculous. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes and 12 seconds, making it the longest in BGT history. But this was just the beginning. DNA tests later confirmed what everyone already knew. Simon Cowell and Samuel Cole shared identical genetic markers. They were indeed twins, separated at birth by circumstances beyond their control. The revelation made international headlines, sparked conversations about family and identity, and inspired thousands of people to search for their own missing relatives. The immediate aftermath was overwhelming. Both men struggled to process 64 years of questions that suddenly had answers. Why had Simon always felt like something was missing? Why had he never felt completely whole, no matter how successful he became? Why had he been drawn to creating families of contestants, groups like One Direction, as if he was always searching for the missing connections in his own life? Samuel faced similar revelations. His lifelong dedication to helping underprivileged children make music suddenly made sense. He'd been trying to create the family harmony he'd never had. His sense of incompleteness, his feeling that he was meant for something bigger than the life he'd built in Australia. All of it clicked into place. Within 6 months, Samuel had relocated to London, not to live in Simon's shadow, but to build something together. They discovered they shared identical tastes in everything, the same sense of humor, the same food preferences, the same way of thinking through problems. They finished each other's sentences and had the same terrible jokes that made everyone around them groan. Samuel's music school in Sydney became the template for a new school Simon established in London. Both institutions focused on giving opportunities to children who might otherwise never access music education, but now they operated as sister schools, sharing resources and philosophies across 2 continents. The photograph of 2 newborn babies that had started everything now hangs in both their homes, a reminder that some bonds transcend time, distance, and the forces that try to break them. Every year on October 7th, their shared birthday, the Cowell twins celebrate not just the day they were born, but the day they found each other again. Samuel never did perform the missing piece on BGT that night, but he gave Simon something more valuable than any golden buzzer could provide, the other half of himself he'd been unconsciously searching for his entire life. The episode became the most watched in BGT history, but more importantly, it proved that some stories are bigger than entertainment. Some moments remind us that family isn't just about who raises you, it's about connections that exist beyond explanation, bonds that survive separation, and love that finds a way to reunite what was meant to be together. Simon often says now that finding Samuel was like getting back a part of his soul he didn't even know he'd lost. And Samuel, who spent 64 years feeling like he was living someone else's life, finally understands why nothing ever felt quite right until that night on the BGT stage, when he looked into his own eyes reflected in another man's face. They've since collaborated on music projects, television shows, and charitable foundations, but their greatest collaboration is simply being brothers, making up for lost time, sharing the conversations they should have had for 6 decades, and proving that some searches end not when you find what you're looking for, but when what you're looking for finds you.